the Hardened Scales deck.
Why is that?
Because he's got 4 copies of Sidisi's Faithful and 4 copies of Reflector Mage.
All right.
The 8 bounce creatures means that even if Paulo does a bunch of work and ends up with a big Avatar of the Resolute or a big Mana Gorger Hydra or a big Hangerback Walker, any of those things, Webb can just bounce them and put them back to Paulo's hand and just kind of reset all Paulo's progress.
Yeah, so Paulo's going to sack Polluted Delta, fetch a land, and Sidisi's Faithful. No sack.
Yeah, it's actually David Ochoa on the left side.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
And then Paulo on the right side. And yeah, you notice that there's no sacrifice on the Sidisi's Faithful. The 0-4 is big enough to block Avatar of the Resolute, and Paulo's currently on mono green right now.
So David gets to play, or Paulo gets to play Mana Gorger Hydra. Unfortunately, this one also doesn't come in with counters, but as soon as David casts anything, really, Hardened Scales going to start doing some work.
Yeah, the Hydra's going to get 2 counters per spell cast by either player. And it's a lot of triggers to remember, but Paulo's been preparing his whole life for this moment. to play the mono green beatdown deck, which I'm sure he loves.
Yeah, I'm sure he's very excited.
And one of the combos here too would be like, if Avatar of the Resolute came down after the Mana Gorger Hydra, Mana Gorger would trigger, get 2 counters. Avatar would get a counter, which then turns into 2 counters. Hardened Scales kind of gives all your creatures +3/+3 if you get a couple counters on them. Problem is Paulo so far hasn't put a counter on anything.
So how quickly do you think this deck kills, Luis?
The Hardened Scales deck, the earliest it can kill, well, technically it can kill on turn 4 with a really, really lucky sequence of draws. But I think in general, around turn 5, the thing is, it still has a bunch of giant creatures, and so even if it doesn't win immediately, it still is in pretty good shape.
So Elvish Visionary for David, gets to draw a card. We find a copy of Reflector Mage.
Yeah, and that's exactly what David's looking for here.
Yeah. Doesn't even really get to undo very much of what's going on because, well, I guess with a Mana Gorger Hydra, yes. But it looks like we have Sidisi's Faithful for David. There is an exploit this time, sacrificing the Elvish Visionary, bounce that Mana Gorger Hydra.
Yeah, and this is what you're going to see. I think this whole match is you're going to see a lot of back and forth where David's just sitting there bouncing Paulo's creatures. The thing is, Mana Gorger Hydra does require a bounce really quickly, especially with the Hardened Scales in play. It grows very, very quickly.
Right, especially against a deck like Riley, because Riley's just has a lot of really cheap creatures, cheap interactive spells, and yeah, that's going to make the Mana Gorger Hydra grow very quickly. So yeah, Servant of the Scale gets to come in as a 2/2.
Also triggers the Mana Gorger, so so Paulo's building up his board presence here, but you notice Paulo has 4 mismatched forests in play, so he's unable to cast any of the white spells in his hand, including the multiple copies of Abzan Falconer.
Yeah, so tell me about Abzan Falconer in this deck.
Well, it was the hardest card to find. A lot of the guys playing it this weekend weren't able to, didn't come prepared with them, and they had to send out an emergency cry on Twitter. But what Falconer does is it gives all your creatures with a +1/+1 counter flying, so it kind of gives your whole team flying, can fly over those Sidisi's Faithfuls, especially in a creature-heavy mirror. It can really get in there.
So the Reflector Mage is going to be able to take care of the Mana Gorger Hydra, and still definitely slowing down Paulo in his endeavors. But yeah, it looks like David's kind of doing what he wants to do right now. Active Jace, ability to, he hasn't really taken any damage so far.
No, David's life total is not under attack, but he hasn't found Collected Company yet. That's the one card he's really, really looking for, because he has a Jace up to 7. You see it just keep ticking up.
Right.
But he's not getting any advantage out of it because he has no spells in his graveyard. So he really needs to find a company which will essentially be a multiple card draw here. Because David doesn't really have much in his graveyard, and every turn that goes by, Paulo gets a bigger advantage. Especially if Paulo does draw planes, things are going to go downhill very quickly for David.
So Prairie Stream is a land for David. Comes in and play tap, doesn't have all the basics he wants yet.
Yeah, and actually David can't get a forest because he looted it away earlier with Jace.
That's true.
Yeah, and Rally's got a 4-color mana base, which normally can come with drawbacks, but he's able to cast all his spells right now, and once he hits a 5th land, he can even cast a Rally for 3, which fills all the requirements his deck is looking for.
Yeah, I've heard it described as a Sultai deck splashing for double white, which
that is an accurate description. That is what Rally does.
Yeah.
And we saw a glimpse of Nantuko Husk in David's hand, so it's going to be a while before he dies here. He also wants to save his last Sidisi's Faithful. He's got 1 in hand. You see he's opting not to play. Yeah,
and with a Sidisi's Faithful too, being so good at slowing down something, especially because the Mana Gorger Hydra, and really when, even if Nissa comes down at any point, like that's just going to make the board kind of get out of control. So it's nice to have that optionality. Looks like Mana Gorger Hydra for Paulo and a pass.
Oh, and there we go. That's a Collected Company for David. So because he doesn't want to grow Mana Gorger Hydra, I wouldn't be surprised to see him just tick up Jace and pass the turn.
feel like he agrees with you. That's exactly what he's going to do.
Hangerback Walker going up to 5. And see, Paulo's creatures get out of control really quickly. And there he goes, Wooded Foothills. That's going to get him Canopy Vista, which lets him cast Obs on Falconer, putting 2 counters on Mana Gorger, and sending Hangerback Walker, Servant of the Scale, and Mana Gorger Hydra to the skies. So that's what this deck's trying to do. It's a pretty simple deck.
The nice thing, too, is that David will be able to, Collected Company, you might find some Reflector Mages and things to interact with.
He's got 3 Reflector Mages and a 4th Sidisi's Faithful to hit off Company. But the good thing for David, even though he's going to take a bunch of damage this turn, is he's not dead, even if he doesn't find any of those things. He's going to take 10 damage this turn if he finds nothing. But that's not the end of the world. Oh, interesting. So Paulo's choosing to pass the turn, letting David cast Company. And I think it's because Paulo has a Dromoka's command in hand, and he wants to set up a 1-turn kill with Falconer, leaving up command for potential interaction.
Very, very cool. That's very neat. So yeah, David is going to go ahead and cast that Collected Company. It seems like there's a couple Elvish Visionaries and then 2 Kahaskan and a Fenza, if I'm not mistaken.
So he's going to get the Visionaries, I think, because he already has a Husk. A second Husk doesn't provide a ton of value. And so he could have multiple Husks. But he'd rather just draw cards, looking for either another Rally or a Reflector Mage. I also would be surprised if David didn't go for Sidisi's Faithful on the Mana Gorger. But Dromoka's Command and Response can actually stop that. If you kill the Faithful before the exploit happens, then it's not in play to trigger. So Paulo's aware of that, and I think he wants to protect his Hydra from a potential Faithful here.
So David found another copy of Collected Company.
He did.
Off of those Elvish Visionaries, which is very nice. Don't know if he has another land, so he can Faithful. Looks like he does. Yeah,
and he has to make sure not to play the Windswept Heath, because that actually can't get a basic, and as you said before, any duels he gets will come into play tapped. So he's going to sack Flooded Strand instead. So I think what this game might come down to is David playing a Sidisi's Faithful, Paulo Dromoka's commanding in response, getting 2++1 counters off the command, 2 off the Mana Gorger Hydra trigger, and then Paulo untapping and playing a Falconer and going in for lethal, David trying to cast Collected Company to hit an answer, to hit a Reflector Mage, or I guess the 4th Sidisi's Faithful.
A little unlikely, but could definitely happen. I wonder how often people miss triggers with the Hard Scales deck.
With Mana Gorger Hydra specifically, all the time. It's just difficult, because every single spell that gets played, you have to remember it. So, I've played against this deck in tournaments before, and I'd say Mana Gorger Hydra gets on average like 0.8 counters per card.
So David's going to take up that Jace, targeting the Hangerback Walker. Yeah, when we were watching Severson play earlier, he just had the dice on the ready.
Yep, and there you see Paulo triggering Hydra. So Webb doesn't get to just sack the creature. He actually has to target, choose the target. So Paulo could actually stop him at this point if he wants to respond to the Dromoka's command. And then Webb can choose not to sacrifice the Sidisi's Faithful
at that point. So it looks like it's still in the stack based on how they're moving cards around. And David has to know that Paulo just hit white mana off the Wooded Foothills. And clearly Paulo has something, whether it's a Dromoka's command or some versions play Feet of Resistance, though that's not currently in Paulo's deck. And David does kind of know what's in this deck. He's played against it online, and he considered playing it. Also, Josh Utterlayton, is playing the deck, and it's one of David's teammates. So David's aware of what's going on, and clearly by thinking this much, Paulo is actually going to reveal what he's thinking about, and I think just go for it. Yeah, what's the benefit of going for it here versus not doing it?
So what Paulo's trying to do is stop the Hydra from getting bounced, and it gets another trigger off the Dromoka's command, so that goes up to 7, plus the 2 counters from command goes somewhere. And then once he plays Obs on Falconer next turn, he's going to have lethal flying damage, especially now that the Avatar's up. And actually, Paulo is getting pretty close to having lethal even without the Hydra. But if David companies into Reflector Mage or Sidisi's Faithful, he can bounce the Obs on Falconer potentially and start blocking with 0/4s or Giant Nantuko Husks.
So it looks like Paulo's going to go for it. There's the Dromoka's command. I think the targets are Avatar and Sidisi's Faithful. Counter on the Hydra.
But yeah, the Hydra gets a counter from the Dromoka's command already, and then I believe Paulo put a counter on the Avatar and then fought the Sidisi's Faithful.
Yeah, I believe that's what I saw as well. So it looks like...
And David's going to sacrifice to the Husk.
Yeah, the Husk is going to eat it.
And then, of course, Hardened Scales means that the counter off Dromoka's command is actually 2 counters. And David's going to pass the turn. So Hangerback goes up to 7 counters, but remember, it's got -2, -0. So that deals 5. Servant deals 2. That goes up to 7. The Avatar makes it deal 10. And the Hydra with more counters deals 19, assuming Paulo plays Obs on Falcon and attacks with everything. Which
Yeah,
Seems like what he's going to do.
Do you think he's going to go for that this turn?
I do, because things aren't getting better for Paulo at this point. Now that David has found a collected company, and plus, see, one of the things that Paulo sees is David had collected company in his graveyard and chose not to flash back with Jace. So that indicates he's got another company in hand. And I'm sure Paulo's aware of that.
Right. So there's a Falconer.
Oh, wow. And Paulo actually drew another white source. So by playing a second Falconer, he means that he makes it so David can't just bounce a Falconer and prevent flying. Though a bouncing Mana Gorger Hydra will make it so David's not facing lethal anymore.
He'll be so low in life, though. It's at what point, how far behind can you be?
Well, David will take 12 off the non-Hydra attackers, assuming he companies into a bounce creature, which he has, we believe, four left in his deck. Yeah, looking at his deck list. So he takes a bunch of damage, but then next turn, if David finds a rally or actually just finds another bounce creature, he could potentially... I guess he only has the one Husk versus 2 creatures, so it's unlikely attacks in for lethal that way. But he's got options. Basically, what it hinges on here is David's collected company hitting the 4th CDC's Faithful or one of the 3 remaining Reflector Mages.
Yeah, so it looks like we're gonna see an attack from almost all the creatures.
Paulo's deciding whether he needs the extra damage from the Servant
The Servant
here,
of the Scale, right?
because if he's not lethal if the Hydra's bounced anyway, attacking doesn't really help much, and he might want to leave it back for Husk. But he also might want to get the most damage through if the Hydra gets bounced, just to make sure that next turn he's got lethal.
Yeah, that's an interesting decision. What do you think? What would you do here in the spot?
If I was Paulo, I would not attack the Servant. I think that it's unlikely to net you something.
To really matter in this game?
Paulo could attack Jace. I don't think he's too worried about Jace's ultimate, though.
All right, so here's what we're talking about. Collected company for David.
See, look, Hydra trigger.
Yeah, on top of his game.
The thing is, even though Paulo didn't get a Hydra trigger there, it's actually just lethal anyway. And I think he just realized it.
Yeah, I think his little hand gesture. Yeah, this happens. This happens when you play Magic in paper.
The difference between a 11-11 Hydra and a 13-13 Hydra is actually nil here, because if it doesn't get bounced, Paulo wins. And David found 2 Catacomb Sifters, which I think is going to send us to the next game.
Yeah, I think I didn't see any sort of bounce creature. There's a chance there was a Faithful. Nope. Yep.
I would say that chance has been reduced to
0. There was a small chance that went pretty much to 0.
So Paulo's going to take game 1 with not even his optimal hand. He did have the turn 1 Hardened Scales, but he didn't draw white mana till much later.
Oh, he wasn't putting counters on any of those creatures till like turn 4 or so, and then we saw how quickly that escalated out.
Yeah.
And David had a lot of ways to bounce things. He did bounce the Mana Gorger Hydra at least twice.
It is funny that David almost wishes he had drawn 1 fewer CDC's Faithful and just had 1 more in his deck to find, because he ran 1 out as a 0-4 blocker, which is fine, but he would rather just play an Elvish Visionary or whatnot.
Right, definitely. So here, taking a look at the sideboards, A, what do you think of the matchups? B, what do you think they're going to do?
So I think that Rally is a slight favorite because Goldfish is a little bit faster, and especially David's version with 8 bounce creatures. Like some people have been trimming Sidisi's Faithfuls. The fact that David has 4 has to make things be slightly in his favor. But, these decks are both pretty fast still, and they both largely ignore the opponent. The Rally has some bounce, but when it's trying to set up its win, it can't really stop Paulo. It can just delay him. And Paulo certainly can't interact with anything that David is doing. After board, that does change. Paulo, has access to 3 Hallowed Moonlights, which he's going to bring in.
Right.
And other than that, there's not a whole lot else that's too interesting. I mean, what the guys playing Hardened Scales, there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
They joked that they're better off just without a sideboard. And actually, Jacob Wilson has a Hedron alignment in a sideboard.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I'm actually serious.
Well, is it for reals?
Yeah, it's a Hedron alignment. He can't cast it. The only reason it's there is to indicate how little his sideboard matters. So Jacob's awesome for that, by the way. I tried to convince Matt Nass to do it. He just would not do it.
Really appreciate people who go far lengths to send a message. So
yeah, that's what he's doing. He's sending a message because he's able to show that this deck doesn't really sideboard. And it doesn't. Paulo's going to bring in 3 cards here, and that's about
amazing.
it.
What do you think? So what do you think Paulo's going to be bringing in since it matters so much? Just the
Hallowed Moonlights. I could see cutting down on the number of hangerback walkers, perhaps.
So we're going to take a look at our other match. It's Owen Turtenwald versus Shahar Shenhar. We have Owen playing
4-color
rally, and we have the...
This is the exact matchup we saw, but the players switch sides. So we've got Owen Turtenwald beating down with Reflector Mages in an Antuco Husk against Shahar playing a Hardened Scales deck here. So like I said, this is a matchup we're going to see a number of times on camera. Part of the reason that the Hardened Scales deck is going to make such an impact this weekend is the card Shahar has in play, Nissa. just the addition of Nissa to the deck with the -2 of putting a ++1 counter on each creature you control, which of course with Hardened Scales doubles or triples
Yeah,
up.
it's just wombo combo.
Yeah, that is in fact a wombo combo. I think that's the technical term. And you know that's why you end up with just a giant force of creatures. Obzon Falconer Nissa just gives all your creatures flying, and we're gonna see a lot of scales in the feature match.
So taking a look at this game right now, it looks like Owen's getting pretty aggressive here, coming in for a lot, and blocking with once you have Nantuko Husk is pretty difficult to do.
And the fact that Owen is attacking here means that I think he's got a good follow up. He presumably has more to play here. Actually, it looks like Owen's just got a lot of lands, so maybe he's hoping to represent a collected company, but it doesn't look like he has access to one right now.
Were you able to take a peek at all and see if he did?
It looked like he had a set of Flooded Strand in his hand.
But if you're Shahar here, if Owen's doing this, you're kind of playing around that, right?
Right, and or assuming that Owen maybe has a rally. That's the thing about Nantuko Husk is Owen has multiple instants in his deck that would make Husk lethal if Shahar didn't block, so I think that's why he threw a creature in the front of it instead.
It wasn't that bad of an exchange. So Shahar is going to crack his land and untap. Looks like he found a forest.
Yeah, and he's got Mana Gorger Hydra and Hangerback Walker, along with 2 Hardened Scales and a Nissa on 3. Like, Shahar's going to win this game very quickly if Owen doesn't find something.
So we're tuning back in to match number 1. We'll see how Owen and Shahar finish up. We'll bring you that later. But Paulo and Webb are getting ready to start out. It looks like, from what I can see right there, yes, Paulo's off to a very good start. Hardened Scales on turn 1.
Yeah, and as this deck has been described, it's Hardened Scales and 56 other cards. If you play Hardened Scales on turn 1, the deck is very, very good.
Right.
When you don't, the deck still can win, but Hardened Scales is what really makes the deck tick. And actually, looks like Paulo brought in Silk Reps too as a way to disrupt, presumably Jace, but potentially even something like Nantuko Husk. Even though it still goes to the graveyard, the Silk Rep can't keep it off the board for a little while.
Well, the nice thing about doing something like that is you do get to take care of the creature while it's out in the battlefield, so then you are waiting until they have something like Rally or find another one, but you do get to slow them down a little bit. And
definitely.
Yeah, and given that Rally just plays a little bit faster than Paulo, that's kind of what he wants to do.
David probably brought in some Murderous Cuts just to up the amount of disruption, and I think that those are decent here. David's got a pretty land-heavy hand, and Silk Rep's looking really good here because David's going to play this Jace, and his hand right now is Collected Company and all lands. So Paulo's just going to immediately Silk Rep. Oh wait, he doesn't have a white mana.
He doesn't have white mana. Oh, that's kind of brutal. But, Servant of the Scale does get to come in as a 2/2. Less embarrassing than the usual, so.
Yeah, it is the Arcbound worker of this deck, which is to say it's essentially a 1-mana 1/1 modular for those who played during Mirrodin, and it's the same kind of card, which is clearly not good enough on its own, but the synergy with the rest of the deck are what makes it good.
So untap for Webb, and yeah, he's in a spot where he doesn't really have anything in hand, just a bunch of land, a Collected Company. He wants to pass some time.
Yeah, he also drew a Murderous Cut, which is a nice addition. And it looks like his Jace is hanging out with his lands too, so he wants to make it look as non-threatening as possible.
Please don't kill it, please don't kill it. Let it hang out for a little bit. Yeah, so it looks like there's a couple copies of Absent Falconer in Paulo's hand. So you had a funny story with Absent Falconer today. You had to put out a bad signal for it?
Yeah, I did, because at about midnight last night, a bunch of the guys who were playing the deck were like, hey, none of the dealers here have Obzon Falconers. How can we get Obzon Falconer? And so I reached out on Twitter, said, hey, a bunch of people need Obzon Falconers. And actually, Hai Bing-Hu, former U.S. national team member, brought me 14 this morning. So I have to give a shout out to him. A bunch of the guys on the various teams are playing with his Obzon Falconers. So I guess the bird is the word, as it were.
You can't really blame people for not having copies of Absent Falconer here.
Well, no, you can blame them. That's acceptable. So David uses Jace main phase in order to find a drop for this turn, because otherwise he wasn't playing anything, and he certainly didn't want to Murderous Cut a Servant of the Scale. And it looks like he found a Zulaport Cutthroat.
Yeah, that's all right. Nice thing for David to find right there. Yeah, so Paulo gets to get his white mana now. Unfortunately, it was tapped before, so he couldn't really Silk Wrap in that spot, but now he's going to be able to.
And even though Silk Wrapping a Jace is nice, Paulo is not super happy about how slow his clock is. Paulo's hand right now is all cards that aren't lands, and he's not putting another creature into play. His hand has a lot of actually reactive cards. Like having double Silk Wrap Hallowed Moonlight is just not the most proactive hand.
So here's a question to you: how good do you think Hallowed Moonlight is against Rally?
It's funny because clearly it's good enough, as in it stops both Collected Company and Rally of Ancestors. But like, look at right now. Like, if David is aware of Hallowed Moonlight, then he wants to just main phase cast Collected Company right now to play around it. Paulo's playing an aggressive deck with not a ton of lands, so I think that he's not going to be able to just leave up Hallowed Moonlight without looking very suspicious. So it depends. We'll see what David does here, but yeah, I see.
Yeah, and there it is. So a Sunken Hollow for David, and he's just going to main phase that. He knows he's safe in this spot, and this is what I was talking about before. I feel like Hallowed Moonlight, you just don't really catch the rally players with it, you know?
Yeah, it gives Paulo more disruption than he has previously, but to say it's just like a cure for a rally is just not accurate. This,
Right.
We're not talking about a Shadowstorm against Affinity here.
Yeah.
We're talking about a value upgrade against rally.
So Reflector Mage and Elvish Visionary is what David finds. He gets to bounce that Servant of the Scale, set him back a little bit, draw a card too. Paulo's just going to untap, play Falconer, and go back to David.
Right, and like you said before, like, look, Wipe found another Collected Company, so now, again, David's going to play around Hallowed Moonlight by playing a main phase company here if that's what he's looking to do. He's also got Murderous Cut and Elvish Visionary as options, though I just like casting Collected Companies. Just keep doing that, and you're just going to advance your board so well.
So he's going to go ahead and cut the Falconer. Yeah, and without any creatures at this point, Paulo's board is looking not so great.
Yeah, and cut so efficient here. Like, David gets to attack for 4. He spent 1 mana to kill Paulo's 3-drop. Paulo has already also missed a land drop. And then, again, David could just main phase a Collected Company. There's basically nothing that can punish him for doing that. One reason not to is he knows Paulo can't really afford to leave up Hallowed Moonlight. But again, I don't think that there's a reason to wait.
There's no benefit to that, right?
Right.
Like, there just really isn't?
Yeah, Paulo's not playing sweepers, and maybe he gets to soak wrap something different, but that's just not that big of a deal.
I guess the potential downside is that if Paulo does play a creature and he gets one of the creatures to bounce or something, you know?
Correct.
Oh, it looks like it was
It was
2 Jaces.
double Jace, but at least he gets to trigger Zulaport Cutthroat by putting both Jaces into play.
Yeah, it's a little bonus.
He could trigger Zulaport Cutthroat, I suppose, is a better way of saying it. And Paulo kind of stuck playing, not very many spells per turn here. Looks like he's going to play Servant of the Scale, and he could also cast a Dromoka's Command.
Yeah, so Servant of the Scale and Dromoka's Command to fight. Oh. He's very, very gone. Yeah, to fight the Jace. And Jace is really threatening here on this board, especially with his Collected Companies and in David's graveyard.
Yeah, David's actually kind of running out of steam. The fact that he missed on Company here and then his Jace died and then he drew a land means that he's now down to just an Elvish Visionary. So, the scales have started to tip here in Paulo's favor, because if David misses on this Elvish Visionary, then he's actually just got to pass the turn, and then at that point Paulo starts taking the advantage because he's got a handful of spells.
And Paulo, I believe, does not have any lands in his hand, so he is definitely looking to draw something to kind of bring him back up to speed in this game. He has been punished a little bit by not being able to, dump out his hand.
He has, but if David can't take advantage of that, then eventually, the person with 5 spells in their hand is going to win here.
Okay, so David's going to crack that land. Finds a Canopy Vista.
Yeah, he likes thinning his deck before casting his card draw here. And David's got the full amount of mana unlocked, just like all the different colors and kinds.
Yeah, so let's see what he's able to find with this Elvish Visionary. Visionary draw card.
David Ochoa just moving so quickly and fluidly, we couldn't see the card in his hand. He's debating an attack here, which means he could throw away Reflector Mage to deal like 3 damage, or throw away a Cutthroat to deal 4 damage, essentially. Neither of those sound like great deals. I guess he's just attacking with those 2. Presumably Paulo's blocking Reflector Mage. That could signify that David drew a rally, or he's just setting up for a rally in the future.
What would you think, if you're Paulo here, what was your assumption here, that he probably has rally in hand, doesn't really care about throwing this away?
I wouldn't assume he had rally in hand, but I think that there's a decent chance. Basically, like, whether or not he has rally, I think you have to block there. I don't think that you get much value otherwise, because the Cutthroat plus just a bunch of creatures in play threatens your life total even without a rally. Husk was a good draw off Visionary, though. Husk will threaten Paulo's life total, and it means that if David draws a rally, he basically just wins, whereas before, if he drew a rally, it would be good, but it wouldn't be game over.
Yeah.
Also, if Paulo didn't have a Silk Wrap, then Husk would be able to threaten lethal just by attacking almost.
So Paulo did not find a land for this turn. He found a Nissa instead, which is a little unfortunate when you don't have any creatures on. Well, one, you have a Servant of the Scale, but he's setting up to be able to have this Nissa do a little bit of work. Unfortunately, right now, I don't believe he can. He just has a Silk Wrap that he can still play this turn.
Yeah, he could, and still grabbing the husk is a good play here. It does force Marshall, it does force David to sacrifice it. It looks like Paul is just going to leave up Hallowed Moonlight instead. So here's actually, it's really funny. Paul left up Hallowed Moonlight to play around Rally. David didn't have one. David then drew the Rally. His hand right now is Rally the Ancestors. So, but if I'm David, and trust me, I know how David thinks. I've known him for a very long time. Paulo only spending 1 mana and just sitting there is very suspicious to me.
Oh, that has to be like your alarm bells are just like wee wee.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the exact noise I would use, but
I feel like it's close.
but I guess it plays. So now Paulo's kind of backing himself into a corner where neither look, David's not going to go for Rally into this. Again, I know David, and he's just going to be very conservative. And Paulo's this is really giving David an advantage here because Paulo's using 3 mana turn on this play. He's not doing anything, and David is using all his mana, but David has no spells to play, and Paulo does. So this is evening up the fact that Paulo has a bunch of spells in hand. It's like they're not there.
Yeah.
He's not getting to cast them.
Yeah, that's crazy. And yeah, Paulo just drew, passed the turn back immediately. David's going to crack that fetch land.
And this is a very good play by David. I'm not saying it's super hard to figure out that Paulo has Hallowed Moonlight in hand, but it's giving David a huge advantage by not running into it. The longer David waits, the better things get for him. Because yes, if Paulo draws a land, things start going downhill. But presumably David's going to draw a spell at some point, even though his last couple of draws have still just been lands.
There you go. So Paulo finds a mismatched forest, unfortunately.
And now things start to turn because Paulo finding another land means that, and David drawing 2 lands in a row, means that now Paulo can play 2 drops and still leave up Hallowed Moonlight, which he's basically committed to leaving up for the rest of the game. But a giant Avatar to the Resolute means that he's going to be able to start pressuring David here.
Yeah, an Avatar of the Resolute coming in as a big boy right here.
Yeah, it comes in with 2+1/+1 counters from the 2 servants, and then Hardened Scales, makes that a third. So it comes in as a 6/5 trample reach.
Yeah.
The fact that it has reach is not a well-known fact.
The fact that it has reach has actually gotten me in limited before because it doesn't look like he does, and then you just run something in it, and then it's very unfortunate.
I've done that too.
So we're going to see a sacrifice. Yeah, the Elvish Visionary, presumably just to drain at this point?
Yeah, it just jumped in front of the Servant of the Scale, so David didn't take damage. And David drew another land. David doesn't even have any fetchable lands left in his deck except for 1 forest. I think that's actually that might actually be the only land left in his deck.
Yeah, they run 1 basic of every kind. Yeah.
Yeah, I think. Yeah,
there's just a forest.
David literally has 1 forest left in his deck. So if David never draws another spell, he's not going to win this game. But there's a lot of spells he could draw to be in really good shape. And there's a lot of creatures he could draw. If he drew a Reflector Mage here, I think that would put him in an okay position.
And so Paulo is now considering going into attacks, and he's getting to a point where he can do this. Whereas before, he was just mostly playing on defense, hoping to draw lands.
Right, and before, that Husk was looking a little frightening, but now that David's not played a creature in 4 turns and Paulo's played another creature and is presumably going to get to play something else this turn if he's got a 2-drop, it means that he can be a little bit more aggressive. Yeah,
so Avatar gets into the red zone. What do you do here if you're David?
Well, it's not quite in the red zone technically. If you see there's like a little bit of gap there. If you're David, you probably just take it. Chumping doesn't help because it has trample. You could block with Husk and sacrifice 2 creatures, but if that doesn't work, then you have nothing in play. And even if it does work, you still have nothing in play. So it's not great. You can probably take 1 hit here.
That also puts you in an interesting position because David has been playing the whole game, assuming that Paulo has a way to answer one of his spells, right? He's been doing that from the beginning.
Right. He's been playing it, he played main phase both companies. He hasn't played essentially a lethal Rally the Ancestors for many, many turns.
So then you can't really put yourself in that spot right here, can you?
Basically what's going to happen is that David's not going to play the Rally into Paulo's open mana until he has to. Obviously, if you're going to lose the game, he is going to cast the Rally the Ancestors. But until then, he's going to assume correctly that Paulo has the Hallowed Moonlight.
So it looks like this Husk has no fear. The Husk is going to get in front of the Avatar, sacrifice the Elvish Visionary, sacrifice his Teleport Cutthroat, drain twice. This Husk is a 6/6.
So now it's a 6/6 versus a 6/5. David's hoping Paulo taps his white mana to use Dramoka's command, but Paulo's not falling for that.
And it looks like things have turned the corner on for Paulo. He was pretty far behind before. He's looking very good right here, especially sitting behind a Hallowed Moonlight.
Well, the funny thing about Paulo's board is that if he doesn't draw a land, his hand is all 3 drops into Hallowed Moonlight. He can't play any of the 3 drops.
That's true.
he's committed, from what we've seen, to leave up Hallowed Moonlight every single turn. So what David needs to do is if David draws another Rally, doesn't Double Rally doesn't actually work because the first rally will actually get all his creatures exiled. So what David really needs to draw is Dispel, which I saw while he was shuffling. He had some Dispels. Look, he drew another land. Well, this is impressive. Basically, if David draws a Dispel, he'll be in very good shape. And if he doesn't, he's got a couple turns to draw something because he's getting attacked for 6. Paulo's probably not going to play anything else this turn.
Yeah, I was going to say, this clock is very fast, so... and then Paulo's doesn't have to do anything at this point, so he just passes back to David. It's crazy.
Who drew an Evolving Wild.
Yes, this is crazy.
I think David's literally drawn like 7 land in a row.
Another hardened scale.
From what I think was a very advantaged position.
Yeah, so Paulo's going to get in again for 6. Put David down to 6.
Yeah, so David, I think, just has 1 turn to draw Dispel. I don't even know if... Maybe drawing a Reflector Mage would actually keep him alive for a turn, but other than that, I mean, he's drawing pretty thin here.
Is it a land?
It is.
So brutal.
So David's now going to have to go for the rally, and he knows it's not going to work. Like, he's already resigned to his fate. Like, there's nothing else Paulo could have. Paulo's 7 cards in his hand. He hasn't been casting spells.
Yeah, so here they get in for 6. David has 1, 2, 3, 4 lands. Rally is going to get countered.
And it's even worse than getting countered because it just exiles all the creatures that would come into play.
Sure,
so
yeah.
it means that even if David had a backup rally, it wouldn't matter because all his creatures would be gone.
So Paulo's thinking. He's certainly going to counter it.
He has to decide whether he wants to cast this. He's going to. There are some situations where you might let that happen, and because to play on a follow collected company. What David could do, let's say he had a little more time, cast Rally for 3. Paulo casts Howl of Moonlight, and response cast Rally for 3.
Yeah.
Which is a pretty cool play that I hope to see this weekend. But unfortunately, David was just completely flooded that game, so it turned out in Paulo's favor.
Yeah, that was very unfortunate when you watch that happen, but it was very well played by David. I really like how he maneuvered his way around what certainly seemed like Paulo having a Hallowed Moonlight, and can't really do anything when you don't draw any lands, but very well played.
Yeah, he did the best he could with the situation he had. I think had he drawn a little better, then maybe that would have helped him turn that into an advantage. But yeah, all you can do is strive for perfect play and do as best as you can.
Yeah, so we're heading back to Owen Turtenwald versus Shenhar. It looks like.
And Shahar's up a game.
Yeah,
here.
He's up a game against Owen, and it's the same matchup.
It is, though this time we see a Nissa in play, sprouting some plants. No, I think Owen's in pretty good shape here. Shahar doesn't have anything else in play, and Owen's got double Reflector Mage, Catacomb Sifter, and a Scion, and he can just start bashing here.
Yeah, so some plans seem like they're going to get in front of.
And it looks like everything went at Nissa.
Yeah, and so Shahar values the Nissa and throws a couple of those plants under the bus. Unfortunately for them, they are dead. But the Nissa gets to live. Still has 1 counter on it, I believe.
It goes down to 1 counter. And Shahar has, he has triple Hangerback in hand, and I'm sure 1 got bounced by Reflector Mage, which shuts off all 3 for a turn. So that's pretty unfortunate for Shahar.
It is pretty brutal when that happens to you when you're playing against Reflector Mage and they just keep bouncing your stuff, and you're like, oh, I have 3 of this card. I definitely can't play anything. So Shahar's going to make another plant.
And now, because he's got a Dramoka's Command, he can play multiple spells this turn, including 2 Hangerbacks.
Pretty unfortunate that he doesn't have Hardened Scales in play. Those Hangerbacks would be, pretty good at blocking everything that's happening right now. But for now, they just get to be 1/1s.
Right, and when with the Hardened Scales in play, the deck is just much, much better. And here we see Shahar without a Hardened Scales and, struggling a little bit. The Hangerbacks are coming in as a 1/1s, which basically are double chump blockers. Though it looks like kind of similar to first game where Owen has a bunch of attackers in play, but it doesn't look like he has much follow-up here.
Well, you see Owen immediately getting into the red zone. All the creatures attack just very quickly. It does look like Shahar has a Dramoka's Command in hand, so what do you think is the best thing he could do? Would he cast it here? What could he do with it?
Well, the synergy between the Hangerback and Dramoka's Command is pretty good because it lets you put a counter on the Hangerback, then have it fight. So what he could do is he can block, and then if he wants, put a counter on 1 Hangerback, fight, let's say, the other Catacomb Sifter. So then the Sifter ends up dying, so do both of Shahar's Hangerbacks, and then Shahar gets 3 counter or 3 tokens.
3 Thopters. And he does have Nissa in play that could potentially minus next turn to give those Thopters some counters as well. So do you think he would go for something like that here?
And I think so. Also, Owen is I believe attacking the Nissa with everything. So it looks like Shahar's actually double blocking. Okay, so here's what I think he's going to do. He's going to double block Catacomb Sifter, put a ++1 counter on, if he does, on one of the hanger backs, and then fight. Oh, looks like he just actually, never mind, decided not to block anything. All right. I do like this better because instead of trying to save Nissa, Shahar's getting to untap with a bunch of hanger backs. And now that they can tap to make themselves bigger, they get a lot more impressive.
Yeah, so there's a third hanger back that Shahar had in hand. And I think there's another Avatar of the Resolute. Yes, and this guy's going to come in with mini counters.
Yeah, drawing the Avatar was pretty good because now Shahar drew a 3-mana or 2-mana 6/5.
Yeah.
He has 3 hanger backs in place. Dromoka's command up, and the hanger backs can start activating. Though Shahar does have to worry about the fact that Owen, has a bunch of creatures in play and has a rally in hand. Shahar doesn't know that, but Owen is trying to set that up as best as he can.
Collected company for Owen. Let's see what he finds.
His main phase collected company. Let's see what he hits.
Is he doing this just for, being worried about Hallowed Moonlight?
He did it end of turn. Shahar, he just passed really quickly. Shahar's activating both hanger backs.
Gotcha.
Owen's casting collected company here.
Yeah, so Jason and Tuka Husk are the finds for Owen. Yeah, you're right. So, yeah, Shahar's going to untap. Found another copy of Dromoka's command.
And I think Owen's actually in good shape. Like, we've seen a couple games in a row where the rally deck just kind of peters out and ends up not really doing a whole lot. But Owen actually has rally in hand. Shahar doesn't have a Moonlight, so there's a good chance we see an exciting Rally of the Ancestors this game.
So Shahar was able to fight that Jace, and the Jace is summoning 6, so he can't flip yet. He gets to grow his hanger back a little bit. He gets to get rid of the Jace, which is very nice. He still has another Dromoka's command in hand.
And Dromoka's command is decent. It provides some disruption. But now that Owen has an Nantuko Husk, he can just rally to get all these creatures back if he wants. He can sacrifice all of them, get multiple more Catacomb Sifter triggers, get more Reflector Mage bounces, and he's going to be able to potentially attack with Husk, or even just use the Catacomb Sifters to rip through his deck to find more copies of creatures, maybe a Zulaport Cutthroat to set up a potentially lethal rally, or at least close to it. Rally also ends up in the spot when they have so many Catacomb Sifters that each rally lets them scry to another rally and just repeat the process. Yeah,
that's the point in Magic Online where you just get a thing that's that big of triggers online. It looks like Owen does have that copy of Rally of the Ancestors in hand.
And he did find a Zulaport Cutthroat off all the scrying. Paulo just tweeted that Mana Gorger Hydra is too skill intensive for me. Luckily for Paulo, even the Mana Gorger Hydra that triggers 4 out of 5 times still very large.
Yeah, I was gonna say if you're gonna end up getting 0.8 counters per Hydra, you're still doing it in fine shape. Sometimes you don't need it to be a 15-15, just a 14-14. Mana Gorger Hydra for Shahar Shenhar.
Speak of the Hydra.
Yep. Still no hardened scales, unfortunately, but those hangerback walkers are huge.
They're getting bigger, but Shahar needs an Nantuko Husk so he can turn them all into flyers. Shahar does not actually have a way besides Dromoka's command to get rid of his own hanger backs. He wants to maybe fight it in a situation where it'll die, because if Shahar had a bunch of flyers, he could actually get in for damage. Right now, Shahar's just passing the turn, and with each successive turn, Owen's advantage is getting larger.
Yeah, I was going to say, how scary is it to just continue going through the game, knowing that Owen's just likely to find, a rally or a Coco, and then what do you do?
Well, Shahar's not very happy with the situation. Owen's now found the second rally, and I think he has to just worry about Hallowed Moonlight. So you might see him do it end of turn if Shahar taps to activate all the hanger backs. Shahar could, and this is a bit next level, is only activate one of the hanger backs, leaving up 2 mana to make Owen be afraid of a Hallowed Moonlight. But I think Owen might just go for this anyway.
So it looks like he's scrying. He doesn't like what he's finding.
And
that one he liked.
Yeah. With 2 sifters in play, he gets a lot of triggers.
Right. So sacrifice to the Husk again. Looks like we're going for it.
And Owen's actually, so yeah, he's just going to go for it.
Yeah.
That's just going to be it. He's using the mana floating from the Scions, playing a rally for 3. Shahar does everyone a service and doesn't make Owen go through every single piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, if you saw that yard, you know it's definitely just going to be game. So, wow, very cool. This hardened scales deck is very, very cool.
Yeah, it's a pretty single-minded deck, but what it does very well, and it ends up with, like you said, 14/14s in play, and 6/5 Avatar of the Resolutes and whatnot. the most impressive draw I heard was actually Sam Party, who, again, spoiled it for everyone by playing it so much. He was playing on Magic Online, actually against David Ochoa, of all people, who we just saw in the feature match.
Yeah.
And Sam went turn 1 Hardened Scales, turn 2 Hangerback. David Ochoa played Eiley Eternal Pilgrim, the 2/3 Death Touch. And Sam goes tick up Hangerback, so now it's up to a 4/4. Dramokas come in, make it a 6/6, fight Eiley, get 6 flyers. Next turn, Nissa, -2, put 2 +1 counters on each flyer.
That's amazing.
Attacked for 18, and Ochoa had used 2 fetch lands, so Sam got the turn 4 kill.
That's amazing.
Very hard to do.
How quickly does this deck typically kill? Is it like a turn, you know?
It's probably like a turn 5 or 6 deck.
Yeah.
It's not, I mean, this isn't a Tarka Red. This isn't going to kill you on turn 4. But what it will do is, at the end of turn 4, it might have a bunch of 6/6s and 8/8s in play. So it puts the opposing deck in a pretty tough spot, even if it doesn't literally deal lethal.
Very cool. So why did this deck came kind of out of nowhere, right?
So the big breakthrough here was that Nissa Voices Zendikar is just insane in the deck. That's the biggest change from previously. Also, Endless One showing up is also a pretty nice little combo with the Hardened Scales. Yeah.
What did you call it? Build your own Ayavugan?
Yeah, essentially Hardened Scales plus Endless One is essentially like the standard version of Ayavugan in Modern. You were not impressed with that comparison earlier, so I wasn't planning on repeating it, but
I think it's pretty good. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Ayavugan.
You have to try out material, before you go live. But the addition of Nissa is really, I think, what made this deck tick. A lot of the pieces were there before. And one card is often enough to make a deck into a completely new archetype. Rather not make it into a new archetype, but give it new life. And here, that's why we see the Hardened Scales deck kind of all over this tournament. Part of it, too, is a lot of these guys either tested together or saw the deck on Magic Online, and decided that this was a good choice.
So Shahar's missed a land drop, because he goes turn 1, Hardened Scales, turn 2, Servant of the Scale.
Well, I mean, you're allowed to keep 1 land Ayavugan in hand.
Yeah.
So that's essentially what Shahar did.
But he did not find another land. He does have another Servant of the Scale, which he can play this turn. There's also Hardened Scales in hand, too. What would you do?
I would probably just play the Servant here, but I don't know. It's close.
Yeah.
So playing the Servant ends up being better if you don't draw a land. Playing the Hardened Scales is better if you do draw a land. So Shahar might be playing to having the best possible draw, just hoping he draws a land and it works out.
Yeah, so Owen's just going to get in there with that Elvish Visionary and play another land. Shahar found an Endless One. It's still not a land, but he does have double Hardened Scales now, so that's Servant of the Scale when it does come down. Or it could be Endless One as well.
Yeah, they're both 3/3s because both of them start with 1 counter if Shahar pays 1. You can't play Endless One for 0 and have it get an additional counter.
Yeah.
But there we go. Look, he tapped 1 mana for a 3/3 Endless One. Ayavugan theory confirmed.
I have heard about the couple plays that you can do with just to get Mana Gorge or Hydra.
Oh yeah, you can play a bunch of zero mana Endless Ones. And you see Owen casting on main phase Collected Company just like David Ochoa did. Both these players very cognizant of Hallowed Moonlight.
Oh, finding that Reflector Mage is really nice for Owen. Gets to bounce that Endless One, especially with Shahar's mana so tied up. Get an Eldrazi from Catacomb Sifter. It looks like Shahar found a land.
He did. I don't know if it's too late, though, and it looks like someone drew all over his Wooded Foothills, too. I wonder if he's aware of that. So Owen has already 5 creatures in play and a grip full of action with enough lands to start playing it all, whereas Shahar is on 2 lands and is going to play essentially 1 spell per turn here.
So Shahar can play both Servant and the Endless One this turn?
That's true. He can't play the Endless One because it got bounced with Reflector Mage.
Oh, that's true.
But otherwise he'd be able to because it's a 1 mana spell. Instead, he's just going to lead with a 3/3 Hangerback Walker.
That's not too bad, but it can block everything, but it's not going to stop this. All these creatures coming in.
Right, and
especially with another Reflector Mage in hand. There you go. Oh, so brutal.
Yeah, and bouncing the Hangerback, it could mean that Owen has the ability to attack into the Servant without worrying about the counters going anywhere. Wow, Owen actually bouncing the Servant of the Scale? Oh, because he's got a Sidisi's Faithful, I see.
Oh, there you go.
He's just bouncing them all.
He just bounces the whole thing.
And I like to play Owen Mage. If you notice, he Reflector Mage the Servant, so now Shahar can't play Servants, and he's deduced that Shahar might have a second Servant, or that Shahar could play 2 in the same turn. So he's actually stopping both of those Servants from being played next turn, whereas Shahar at best could play 1 Hangerback. So Owen doing his best to keep Shahar constrained on mana here.
And he's doing a good job. What can Shahar do this turn?
He can play an Endless One, he can play a Hangerback, he can play a 3/2 Avatar of the Resolute. None of these options are great.
I meant more like what can he do to ever come back in this game?
Oh, nothing. He's taking 7 this turn, so Zulaport Cutthroat's going to be more than lethal.
Yeah.
And
so Second Scion, some scrying.
Owen's
He
scrying
likes
for good
whatever.
form.
Oh wow! There you go.
And that'll do it.
That's enough. Wow, that was a very quick game by Owen Turtenwald. Unfortunately, Shahar kept 6, 1 lander. He gets the scry. He didn't find a land. It happens.
Yeah, and it was for a one-land hand in Standard, which is not a format conducive to one-land hands. Shahar got to do a couple good things. He got to play, Hardened Scales and Servant of the Scale and Endless One, but that still wasn't enough to compete with Owen playing a bunch of 3-mana spells.
All right, so that is round 4. We're going to bring BDM here in the booth. We're going to talk about who's here in the tournament. Yeah, and that's it for round 4. See you guys in a bit.